Welcome everyone to not yet another episode of Disruption Talks. This is a completely separate format where we have live discussions, typically moderated by someone and then utilized by a Netguru expert and an external expert. And today we will be talking about the cloud, about AWS, and about streaming, because what exactly happens when you press play, right? For example, you want to watch a Formula One race that's happening in Bahrain. Between that live stream data going under the ocean, going to a Frankfurt AWS center, and then landing on your screen, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening, especially if it's not just one person pressing play, but millions. Scale. It's always the concern of whether the product will work, whether it'll be able to handle the interest and the attention from people. So today the topic is scaling like Netflix, question mark, how to enhance your competitive advantages with the cloud. And joining us today is Victor from AWS and Radosław, or Radek for short, from Netguru. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's pleasure is all ours. So, of course, I'm not saying that the company that we will be discussing today has scale like Netflix. I'm actually asking that question. But before we jump into the discussion, I think we owe it to our audiences to give a short personal introduction. So, Victor, of course, let's start with you.
Of course, yeah. So I'm Victor. I'm a solutions architect in the partner sales organization at AWS. I'm based in Sweden. And I work with partners basically during the initial conversations with customers, the pre-sale cycles, to help bridge that gap between the business requirements and the technical solutions that we can put together to help solve those for our customers. So I'm always excited to work with partners like yourselves to help our common customers reach their goals. So that's what I do.
Okay. Radek, same goes for you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Radek, and I'm Cloud Engineering Manager at Netguru. I work on cloud solution with my team of cloud experts, where we try to solve complex projects of our clients every day. And I think the most important thing here is that we, as a team, as a Netguru, we achieved the AWS technology partner, advanced partner last year, and it was a great achievement for us.
Oh, one last thing you forgot is that AWS is your favorite, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Victor, if we could come back to you and speak about your current role, because I would like to ground it both for us and the audience watching. What is it that you do? What's the major mission? What's the KPIs? What's the day-to-day? And maybe the journey that led you to be the Victor at AWS, because I'm guessing that wasn't your first job from the beginning. Maybe there's a backstory. So if a short background in terms of how you came to be and what do you do on a daily basis and what drives you, and then we can jump straight into the discussion.
Sure, yeah. I actually have a consulting background, so I used to work for cloud partners, helping our customers migrate to the cloud. So I worked with that for quite a few years. Prior to that, I did some software development, so my background's a little bit mixed. But yeah, today I work at AWS with partners. I'm now on the other side, basically helping our partners engage with our customers and take our customers from where they are to where they want to go, and helping them migrate to the cloud and realize their business goals. So of course, one of the main metrics for us is just, the number or the amount of involvement that we get from partners on our opportunities, because we know that we really depend on our partners to scale. We cannot do this alone. We cannot scale without our partners. So partners are really crucial for us. And my job is to kind of help our partners navigate the AWS space and help our partners' customer also navigate that space and find the best solutions to their problems. So that's kind of how I landed here, and it's a really rewarding job to work with partners, because it's quite a big impact on the kind of work that we do. Because when a partner is empowered to deliver great solutions to our customers, then we can reach a lot of customers, as opposed to us from AWS trying to reach every customer individually. So it's very nice to work with people like you.
Okay. I mean, I can't say because I'm not coming from the delivery background, but I'm pretty sure that your words, Radek's words, and the certifications just certify basically what you said about the pleasure and the benefit outcome of working together. So, and of course, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. I've seen that you have been for years and years and years in the cloud space, either in a commercial aspect or in an academic approach, right? I'm seeing some guest researcher or PhD researcher positions here as well. So I am absolutely safe about the merit of our conversation today, especially if we have someone even from academia. So I have questions for you guys. The first question is, because we will be discussing not AWS as a concept, not cloud applications as an abstract case study, but we will be discussing a real life case study of an Netguru client. And their name is ADN, Animate Digital Network. I invite everybody to have a look. It's a pretty big streaming service that, you guessed it, streams anime. And the reason why I was asking the question at the beginning, scaling like Netflix, is because I'm pretty sure that no matter what kind of content you serve, at the end of the day, the data needs to be stored somewhere, needs to be released somewhere, and that has to happen on and on and on with multiple changes to the network. So it's ADN, it's Netflix scaling like a big streaming platform, essentially. So Radko, if we could start with you, what were the main challenges of the ADN project, and which were the most difficult to tackle from our Netguru perspective?
Okay, so products and software that expect high traffic and thousands of users have very high and restrictive requirements. They must be available upon request by the user, and our mission on every project is resolving all breakpoints and implementing best practices and innovation in the project. All of our engineers, especially solution architects, are focused to create the best infrastructure possible. During the design discovery phase in ADN, we found some key points for improvement that challenged us. The first one is the potential downing during high traffic that could hinder users in receiving the service. The second one is unsatisfactory website performance. The third one was outdated technology of web services. And the last one was about the legacy technology and inefficient setup that prevent the platform from scaling. So on this basis, we decided to use AWS services, which are designed to support a highly scalable, highly available, and always up-to-date infrastructure. And I think the most difficult part was related to the legacy, which required many changes and decisions and a completely new approach to solving the problem. The experience of our cloud expert allowed us to find a suitable solution that we used in this project.
That was exactly my thought, that legacy tech should be the most difficult one, because with every other aspect that you mentioned, it's essentially like you're not dealing with the past. You don't have any baggage. You can just build smarter, better, scale higher. But if you have to look back and there's some debt, I'll be very curious to learn how exactly AWS can act like a time machine, I guess, and relieve you of your problems of the past, even though you are trying to be in the future. So my question is, Radko, how did the AWS infrastructure help with solving these issues on the ADN project?
Okay, so I need to start to a little bit explain some experience. So we as a AWS Advanced Partner, we proved that we have knowledge and expertise in the AWS environment. And one of AWS's top programs is the AWS Well Architecture Program. Based on that program, we focused on the 6 pillars in order to build the infrastructure for ADN. And the first pillar is the operational excellence pillar, which is focused on running and monitoring systems and continually improving processes and procedures. The second, I think, the one of the most important for that kind of the project, it's the security pillar, which is focused on protecting the information and systems. The third one, it's about reliability pillar, which is focused on the workloads, performing their intended function and how to recover very quickly from failure to meet demands. The next pillar is based on the performance, which is focused on structure and streamlined allocation of IT and computing resources. The next one is about the cost optimization pillar. As name said, it's focused on avoiding unnecessary costs. And the last one is about sustainability pillar, which is focused on minimizing and environmental impacts of running cloud workloads. So based on that, the infrastructure that we built were implemented with the help of infrastructure as a code. We used the Terraform and the main infrastructure development tool, which is supported by AWS. What services did we use to build this infrastructure? In this project, the infrastructure is quite large, but it was based on the EC2 containers managed by the ECS. So we also used the cloud native solution, such as AWS Lambda, APIs, S3, or the network and database solution, such as Route 53 and CloudFront, and of course the RDS like Aurora.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm taking notes here in regards to what you were saying, and otherwise than all of those expected pillars on a technological product. The sustainability one, it's not a surprise anymore. It's nice to have turning into a must-have, right? With the progress that we're experiencing, and I think it's also a competitive advantage of sorts, where especially companies like ours, being a B Corp, we want to make sure that it's not just about our internal operations, but also the second-term ripple effects that stem from the companies that we work with, like AWS. So Radko, the last question to you, and then we'll be talking to Victor mostly. Although I'm curious to hear some exchange of opinions, I'm pretty sure you will be agreeing on most things, but still, if there's something that we can give the audience in terms of a discussion, let's do it. So Radko, how would you explain the concept of scalable infrastructure to a non-tech person sitting right here? And how does the scalability factor affect the end user's experience? Does ADN and Netflix have a large scale, and do they scale?
Yeah, exactly. So the ADN and the Netflix, it's very similar. There are a lot of these projects. It's a huge platform for streaming. So I think that best explained for scalable infrastructure to non-tech user, I think it's a highway could be a good metaphor. For example, if there is a car accident or traffic jam on the motorway, you will probably wait for the collision to be resolved. How long? You probably don't know. But that's regular highway. And what if would be a scalable one? Yeah. Imagine highways, roads, a lot of traffic, but no traffic jam. And even if a car accident happens, you will always keep driving forward. So maybe there will be some detour, but you will never stop. And from my opinion, this is the scalable infrastructure. And that's why large projects where we can expect high traffics, lots of users need scalable infrastructure. And for the end user, it's unaware that infrastructure is highly scalable. Its requirements are availability. The user wants to have access to the potential application anytime, anywhere, and wants it to run fast. Yeah, without the use of scalable efficiency infrastructures and application used by thousands of users, probably at the highest load, the performance, availability would drop drastically. And this would cause user dissatisfaction and ultimately potential financial losses for the company.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, especially as a non-tech person after your explanation, that at no point do I want to be over ready, as in I don't want to keep the engine running at all times, even if I'm not driving, in case I have to drive. But you also never want to have the user experience buffering. You never want to guess which piece of content they'll decide to watch. And you can never really predict that, because if there's a spicy piece of content that was just released, like what we've seen, I don't know, on HBO Go, there's been Euphoria, there's been Succession on Netflix, there's been, I don't remember the show that everybody was going on about with the games. Never mind. But you can never really expect how the audiences will like that. And if an audience likes that, that can be an immediate effect that you cannot anticipate that this specific episode will be that much more attractive to the viewership. And that's my point. So, Victor, scalability, security, availability. Why are these the ABCs of building a reliable cloud infrastructure? It sounds like a pretty simple question, but I'm guessing you're going to explain it to me nicely.
Right. So to start with scalability, right, which has been the topic mostly here, it's really, that is fundamental when it comes to reliability, because you want to have that capacity or that ability to increase capacity in infrastructure as you need it. And one important thing to sort of note here is that what we really suggest when it comes to designing your infrastructure is to have horizontal scalability as opposed to what we call the vertical scalability. The vertical scalability would be to essentially add compute power to your instances, essentially increase the size and capacity of your instance. But that's obviously going to hit a bottleneck very quickly, because you can only scale so much, first of all. But also, maybe it's not CPU and memory what you really need. Maybe your server's ability to handle requests may depend a little bit more on the network and the parallelization, which you cannot achieve by having one giant instance. This is one thing. Another thing is that if the instance goes down, it takes a lot of capacity with it. And it can become a single point of failure also if you don't have enough number of instances to sustain an increasing load, because when one instance goes down, then the other ones that are up will need to overwork essentially. So really one of the design principles in the reliability pillar that we have is to leverage horizontal scalability. So instead of having one giant instance, have small instances, plural. So you keep adding instances as you need them. And that essentially gives you a virtually limitless ability to scale, because you can keep adding instances. You need to design them the right way. They cannot be storing state inside the instance. It needs to be outside in the distributed shared storage. That's another conversation. But as long as you follow those design recommendations, then you can have that elastic horizontal scalability with small instances, so that if one of them goes down, which you should expect to happen, because things go down, everything fails all the time. It's one famous quote from our CTO. So you should expect them to go down. And that shouldn't worry you, because you should be able to simply create new instances to pick up the slack, so to speak, and keep your availability. And so then to touch on availability, that's the most simple definition is really the percentage of time. It's usually how it's measured, the percentage of time that it's been up. So uptime divided by the total time. And it's typically measuring 99.9%, and so on. But it's essentially your workload being available to your users. And that's not only being up and running, it's also about being able to respond to requests in a reasonable amount of time. If it takes too long, that's not available, even if it's up and running. So that horizontal scalability helps with that as well, increasing your aggregate workload availability, because you have many workers ready to take in requests. And obviously, I don't need to explain to anyone that if you lose availability, you lose customers, you lose trust. If you have contractual SLAs in place, that's monetary costs that you need to pay. So it's very important, obviously, to have proper monitoring in place, proper automation to make sure that if your service go down, things can recover, hopefully automatically. But at the very least, people should be notified as soon as possible when there's an issue. And then finally, security, which is a pillar of its own in a well-architected framework, but it also plays into reliability, because if you're not able to protect your infrastructure against denial of services attack or any kind of attack really that can bring your systems down, then you lose availability. And if you don't have proper access control as well, a hacker or an evil agent can take control of your systems and tamper with your data, and you lose data integrity, and your applications will obviously just go down and malfunction. So security plays into reliability as well. So that's
sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead. That's really the why these three things are very fundamental, but there are others as well in the other pillars of architecture framework.
Yeah. We'll jump to that in a second. And I want to agree, coming from a non-technical perspective, but still a business perspective, that even with the SLAs, even with any penalties, even with the biggest of apologies, there is no mathematical equation that allows you to sort of do that to your users. You owe it to your users to stand strongly on those pillars that you mentioned, because otherwise, it's very difficult to recoup a bad impression and turn it into a good one. And no amount of free credits or anything like that will make you do that, especially if, for example, something's happening live and you know that you're a fan of something and others are watching and you can't find out what's happening, and you find out from your Instagram feed because the live stream isn't working. So definitely something you don't want to have from a business perspective, because buying back that trust, almost impossible. And speaking of those pillars, it's important to mention that, for example, the giant that is Instagram today, all right? I was just recently watching an interview with the founder over at Lex Friedman's podcast, and it's interesting to see that it's not obvious for everybody, not even for founders. They had a moment at the beginning where they didn't know what an AWS instance is. So I just want to say that any non-technical person shouldn't feel bad at any point, and we just welcome you to join such webinars, read things from Reddit, explain like I'm five, because you will need to understand it even if you're not a technical person eventually. So what you mentioned, the other pillars of the well-architected framework, what are they?
Yeah, so it's been kind of mentioned already, but just to sort of recap, we have the reliability one, and then security, operational excellence, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and the new one, which is the sustainability pillar. So those are sort of, each of them contains design principles and best practices that we've seen with years of experience working with customers that really work in the long term to future-proof and optimize your architecture. So they are kind of generic in the sense that it really works. It's not specific to a use case or an industry or a type of customer. Those are really design principles. So it's really foundational in that sense, which is why we call them pillars. It's the foundation upon which you can have then your own specifics based on your industry, which we now have the well-architected lens, as we call it, which are the little bit more specifics that you can see in places like machine learning or other more specific use cases. But the well-architected framework is quite generic and it's quite foundational. And they play around together, like I mentioned before, right? So security is going to play into reliability as an example. So will operational excellence, which is all about automation and making changes through a pipeline and reducing the human intervention and human error. Those are all things that's going to improve the reliability of the workloads just by means of reducing the risk of someone making a mistake, as an example, right? So all these pillars and design principles, they kind of work together in tandem, which is why it's important to have the full breadth and the full set of pillars as a foundation. and not focus on one over the other, but rather try to really be comprehensive there. Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense, and I'm actually having this thought here. I'm going to mention sustainability again. That usually companies mention sustainability as a layer on top, maybe some icing on the cake, maybe something that's like here's the majority of the presentation, and at the end we're also sustainable. But here you use the exact words that not one is more important than the other. And when you position sustainability as a pillar, not as paint that covers the entire product, but actually something that is equally or similarly strong to other pillars, that's a very novel approach. That's a very novel approach, because essentially what I am hearing as a potential customer or as someone who works at Netguru is this wouldn't work as well if it wasn't for sustainability being an inherent pillar of that, not just something that is a nice gold coating on top of it all. So really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Radko, back to you.
Mm-hmm.
When tackling complex projects like the ADN one, the process usually starts with a cloud audit to establish where we are, to diagnose, just like you would at a doctor's appointment. So how do clients benefit from such a service?
Okay, this is a good question, and I think all of the products should get the cloud audit, and it's a kind of the review of application, infrastructure, and customer requirements. A team of the best experts analyzes all aspects to find the best possible solution for our client, and many factors affect the final solution, but we always want to use the potential offered by cloud computing and cloud native solution. After the audit, the client receives a comprehensive report containing detected problems in the infrastructure and application and our recommendation. And after implementing the recommendation, we could include in the audit report the client can expect increased efficiency, security, and possibly lower costs.
Yeah. And if I may flip that question,
Mm.
how does a client suffer from the lack of such a service? Because I think that what also oftentimes is omitted when thinking about technical audits is that, there's two sides of the coin. There's the upside and there's the downside. You can gain the upside, but you need to protect yourself against the downside. So Radko and Victor, of course, I'm inviting both of you to this discussion. Can you share any memories from the past, of course, without naming any names, where you've seen someone not doing an audit, sometimes not setting out the foundation, and how that came back to bite them?
Well, I can start, because when you engage with AWS to do a migration, you're going to notice that we have a program for migration specifically. That the first thing you're going to notice that the first phase of that migration is going to be this kind of foundation that we're talking about here, this kind of discovery, this kind of first of all, initial conversations, just to have a sort of sponsorship and common understanding across the organization, which is really foundational. And then from there, you go to doing a thorough discovery of where you are, what kind of systems you currently have, how are you doing things, what is your current operating model, because all of that is going to influence what is then the best migration approach, because there's no one size fits all, really. And it all begins with that initial assessment, or what you guys call the audit, the first audit, right? So I can tell you that just the fact that we have this as a principle, as a guiding effort in this migration framework, is because we've seen that if we don't do it, it doesn't work. So with a lot of customers that skip those sort of initial steps, then they tend to fail in their migration strategies. And what really works is to have that kind of discovery, that kind of setting the level setting basically across the organization, and understanding where it is that you are, what's your current maturity level, what's your current operating model, and then from there going to where you want to go.
Reason why I'm asking the question this way, and Radko, I'm waiting for your answer as well, is because even if you're not in sales, you're still selling the benefit, and humans are very much loss averse. And understanding what you stand to lose or what the consequences will be, the remorse, the regret. Regret is stronger than gratitude, essentially. So, Radko, in your experience, which I'm sure you've had many in Netguru or even before, how have you seen that be a suboptimal scenario when someone decides to just go without checking where they are?
Okay, so as Victor said, the most important thing it's to use the guide for the migration and understand how the cloud it's working, because if the client wants to migration from the, for example, the on-prem one-to-one to the cloud, and this is that situation where when we potentially could lose a lot, not only the data, but of course the money, because we don't use the cloud as a native solution. So that kind of the project was a lot in the last few years because the clients don't understand correctly how the cloud is working, because they understand that cloud it's as some kind of the just virtual machines, and you can put all of the software them, and it's not the same. Yeah, that on-prem. Okay, you can on-prem could do some virtual machines and the solution, but on the cloud computing you can use the potential of the native of the cloud. Yeah, and this is very important, I think.
So I recall this situation in particular when I had this one client and I had a DevOps officer on the call, and we were trying to paint a picture for the client that they were using the argument that, nothing has happened so far, right? Like the gambler's fallacy, that every time I've been throwing, it's ending on red. So why should I anticipate that it would ever go for black? And here the DevOps officer used a very, very smart metaphor that I, first of all, understood immediately, and it made the client become convinced just like that. They used the very smart metaphor of a car that is driving without insurance and without fastened seatbelts. Sure, you've been lucky enough that so far you haven't hit anything, nobody drove into you, but once that comes, you'll be flying out the window and regretting not fastening your seatbelts and not having that insurance bought in advance. So I see an audience question that's highly related to what we're saying here. What seems to be some of the main things that prevents clients from adopting cloud technology? It's a very similar question to what I'm asking. Like, why would anyone not do it the right way those days, big or small?
Right. Well, one of the common concerns we hear is sometimes around security, and in particular security of the data. Some customers may get concerned about moving that data over to the cloud. And of course, we have good ways to address this, because obviously we are aware that data security is important to our customers. So AWS have or has security as our job zero, as we say it. It's really core to what we do. Everything starts with security. With every new service, with every new development, we are thinking about how to keep things secure. And we have hundreds of thousands of customers that have been successful in keeping their data secure in the cloud and driving quite some value out of it. Sometimes there is a cost conversation. Although what we typically see for our customers is that the consumption model of the cloud, of paying as you go and being able to very granularly assign capacity to your resources and really only pay for what you use, and never being that state of over provisioning or keeping the engines running at all times, coming back to that car analogy, right? So typically we see then that cost doesn't become a concern anymore. As a matter of fact, a lot of customers are able to save costs by moving to AWS or to the public cloud. And finally, I would say the third major concern is sometimes just the resistance to change is some customers, particularly in the enterprise space, they have sometimes a very mature IT organization that have been working for many years in traditional kind of IT models. And for them, it becomes challenging to completely change that operating model and that organizational structure to adopt something that is completely new to them. But obviously, we have partners like yourselves and ways that we can help them navigate that space and getting to where they want to go. And we ourselves recommend incremental steps and not trying to do everything at once, but progressively modernizing your infrastructure.
That's a very valid point, because most of the times the resistance is grounded in some facts, but the way that the resistance is presented sometimes is irrational, sometimes it's more emotional than factual, right? So I really appreciate what you're recognizing here, that it's never really the user's fault or the customer's fault or the potential client's fault, right? It's on our shoulders, the responsibility to make sure that we can explain, justify the value, and basically show that we are there to protect them and prevent them from any future potential negatives if they do not follow with this. So I really like this incremental approach. Radku, what about you with this question? What do you think causes clients to be stubborn? Let's call it like that.
So it's a good question. So from my perspective, the most important thing for the adopting the cloud technology, it's to focus on what we've got here and what kind of the infrastructure we've got. And sometimes it's very hard to migration, as Victor said, because we've got some depth technology like the mainframe. This is, I think, the good example. It's not that easy to migration, that kind of the technology, but the first of all, it's to understand how it's work and how what the benefits it's from the cloud computing.
Fair point. So the next question that I have, according to data from Forrester, which is a research company, half of the North American enterprises will adopt cloud-native technologies in this year, making it the core of their cloud strategy for the years ahead. What's more, other forecasts show that by 2025, so just in 3 years, as much as 95% of new digital workloads will be deployed on cloud-native platforms. So how can businesses leverage those trends to keep their applications infrastructure up to date? Or maybe once again, asking from a non-technical perspective, so you can give me a cool answer, is if I'm a business owner and I know that this is coming, how do I ensure that I ride this wave at the right time, not prematurely, not too late? Also, all of those things. If I'm a non-technical person and I know that this shift is going to happen, how do I, where do I stand in line to make sure that I'm adding to this shift and not causing problems, so to say?
Right. I would say the very first thing to look at is having a cloud strategy. That's fundamental. And by cloud strategy, I mean really top-down drive and decision to adopt the cloud. That really needs to come from the C-suite, from the high level of the organization. And there needs to be that net of support, if you will, in the organization, that cultural or that decision really to move forward to the cloud is something that is a company strategy. We see that customers that do not have that strategy in place when they begin, they very often fail to achieve their goals with cloud migration. So having a cloud strategy as a first step. The second thing I would say is to have an environment and a culture of learning and continuous improvement. Always think about innovation, thinking about learning, thinking about better ways to serve your customers, and stop spending time on what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting, or things that don't really add value to your business, like managing service, managing infrastructure, managing data centers. We do that very well. So how about you let us do that while you focus on your innovation, on your developments, on adding new products or new features to your existing products, and finding ways to improve your customer experience, for example. And then finally, look at where you are today. What is your current maturity level, and see what's next for you. Again, coming back to that point of incremental steps, see what's the low-hanging fruit, or what's the next step that you can do to modernize, to remove undifferentiated heavy lifting, and start focusing more on innovation. Just to give you one example, maybe your IT team is spending a lot of time managing databases. How about using a managed database service where all the heavy lifting of database maintenance, patching, keeping up with security updates, and all that is taken care of by AWS, and then you can basically just consume that service really as a service. You inject data, you get data out of it. That way, your teams are able to manage to move much faster. And this is just giving one example, right? You can do this with all other sorts of technology. Always trying to aim for that serverless option, to that option that is managed, that I can just consume. If I don't really need to build anything from scratch, if I have already what I need there, ready to consume, and I can pay for only what I use, then why not? And then look what's next to improve your user experience. Maybe it's using machine learning or trying to derive insights from your data, automating call centers, having chatbots to interact with users. So start thinking ahead and always innovating and pushing for things that really add value, and remove the things that do not add value to your business. And that way, you're gonna make sure you are innovating at a fast enough clip that you're not gonna allow your competition to disrupt you. Basically, it's what this would be about.
What you just said, I'm sure it's going to be a quote either for a graphic or for like a 30-second review after this content. So really appreciated that. Yeah, I completely agree that most often, maybe not most often, but sometimes people do fall into the mistake of, I will handle everything myself, but you don't become an accountant, you do have an account. You run your business. And likewise here, it's much better for someone to handle that for you instead of you trying to develop that from scratch. But the business beauty of Amazon changing its own cost centers into revenue centers for the entire world is a topic that's a great one, but it's for an entirely different podcast. I wanted to flip the question, and I'm asking now both you, Victor, and Radek, because Victor, you just mentioned C-suite is necessary, but we know that oftentimes, especially in resistant organizations, and even sometimes with new tools, it's the employees that become the evangelists, the promoters, the internal advocates for, hey, let's implement this because this just made my job 20 times easier, right? So, of course, if I'm talking to the C-suite and the C-suite is on my side, hey, great. But if there is general resistance flowing through the company, but you are somewhere, let's say in the product space, you can prove the case, how would you go about that internally to gain sponsorship for the idea, to empower that person? If you are, let's say, the underdog in this fight, even though it's not a fight and you're working for the benefit of the project or the company in question, how do you make it work?
Right, that's a very good point and a good question. And what I would say then is have a champion, right? Someone that is willing to drive that change, even if the leadership is not really bought into it yet. And try to get a free trial account or a small budget account where you can do some experimentation, some POC. Try to find a low-hanging fruit, that thing that's gonna show some value. It could be automating a process. It could be launching a new product internally. It could be a small little thing that you can then take to your leadership and show, hey, this is what we were able to do in this amount of time because we were able to move very quickly here. We didn't have to order servers, go to procurement and get licenses for software. None of that. We were able to spin up an account here and in a few days we have this POC, and then when you prove that value, then you can maybe from there you can maybe try and secure at least something bigger in terms of budget and commitment to pursue this. And you keep doing this until you prove enough value that you get that sponsorship. For then, once you have that sponsorship, and then initiate a more bigger transformation project, and you put more resources into it. But start early and don't go too big before you have that sponsorship. But by all means, if you have a champion in your organization, if you want to be that champion, then start building. We provide the tools for you to do so. We provide credits. We provide free trial services that you can use to start building and start showing value to your leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a function of, can you save me time? Can you solve my problem? Okay, let's talk, basically, right?
Right.
Radku, if you could tackle this question for me as well. I'm guessing you have a lot of stories from either Netguru or outside of Netguru where you've seen
Of course.
super sorts jumping.
Okay, so if you want to force some kind of the new tool, which probably could automation your work, you need a good evangelist, like a tech lead or the leader of the project, because this is an expert and could give you the some good information about that tool and how that kind of the solution or the tool could help us to deliver the application infrastructure, or doesn't matter what else could develop very fast, and or maybe faster than a normal time. So I think the cloud and IT, it's developing very fast, and on the next years of the new tools and the new libraries, we should focus on that which is on the trend actually, and we need that kind of the champions to improve that. That is a good way. So still, I agree with Victor. Any project and any business needs to have any plan for a strategy, not only for the cloud, but of course of the project.
Okay. So that's all the questions that I had, but the audience had some as well. So let's start with one from Radek, maybe. Radek, first of all, he makes the remark that it's nice to see Netguru and AWS together, but he also asks a question, and the question is as follows. Among all of the principles of a well-architected framework, which ones do you think are the most crucial in order to deliver customer success? And I heard from you that all of them are equally important. So is this a question that you can answer?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, the most crucial pillar is scalability and availability, because the end user should always get the access to the application which is implemented into well architecture.
Yeah, I would come back to what I said in the beginning, that I think all of them are important because also they play together, right? Even if you absolutely want to focus on availability or reliability, you're not going to have as strong as a foundation if you skip the design principles in security or in operational excellence. I gave the example of, in security, if you don't protect your systems against denial of service, then your reliability is not going to be, no matter how well you design it, if the environment is not secure, you cannot just guarantee good reliability. So just because of that interplay between the different pillars, I wouldn't really call one out as the most important one to focus on. You may have a business priority in terms of reliability or availability, but still, if you don't have that entire foundation, you're not going to have as strong as a foundation or as a environment.
Because of course, everybody would like to have all of the pillars crossed off. But for example, when you're a startup on a budget, sometimes you might have to prioritize due to business decisions, just like you mentioned, Victor. And I can envision a streaming service that has extremely confidential information where security is always going to be the priority. You can wait for it to buffer a little bit. Sometimes you might get an error, but the key thing there is that that piece of content, anything that's supposed to be displayed, never gets to anybody who's not supposed to lay their eyes on it. And similarly, maybe you're running a service that sends short videos from traders. You pay for that, and traders send you information. And the availability, the speed, that's what's the most important thing there, because you don't really care about the security that much because they're giving you their opinion, but you care about the fact that you get that in real time, that data, that advice, anything that the trader has recorded on the video you're about to watch is not expired because the market already acted and you're too late. So I agree that on principle you should have all of the pillars covered, but in real life sometimes, especially when it's a matter of money, it is sometimes the in between of them all, right? Would you agree, or am I wrong?
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's a matter really of balancing the design principles across the different pillars so that the one thing that you're aiming for is still maintained. Because you're right, security might not be a priority in that one case, but it's still, it may be the one thing that will bring your availability down when you need it. So you lose availability because you completely neglected security. So maybe don't spend as much time in security as a pillar, as trying to make a comprehensive architecture around all those design principles. We'll have the basics in there so that your priority is still standing on a strong foundation, if that makes sense.
Completely. And the last question that we have from Zofia. Zofia asks, with more and more clients adopting cloud services to their business, new challenges emerge. What are those challenges? Do they actually emerge? Like, Victor, what keeps you up at night when you think of the potential problems with the huge development? We discussed the Forrester predictions that by 2025, there's going to be 95% of new digital workloads all in the cloud. What kind of problems does that cause to you? What kind of new, previously non-existent or just marginal in scale problems occur that haven't been here before?
Well, I guess the main one is that change of operating model, right? When you move to the cloud, you kind of have to work in new ways. You may have traditional ways of working. For example, a traditional IT organization may have, network engineers that are used to logging into a network device, CLI, and troubleshooting and doing whatever the things they do. But then they move to the cloud and they don't have that access because really they shouldn't. The infrastructure should be abstracted away from you, basically, so that you can focus on the real things that are adding value. So having that shift in mentality can be a challenge to some organizations. Having that flexibility and adaptability to move to a new operating model. And obviously the way we kind of address that is through training. We have tons of resources to get people up to speed with ways of working in the cloud. We have these best practices published. We have partners like yourselves that help those kind of customers navigate all that complexity. And then one kind of challenge that emerge also when people move to the cloud sometimes is the flip side of having the agility and the ability to build fast, is that this can hinder security in some cases, because if you give your entire development team admin access to your AWS account, for example, they can do some damage in terms of spinning up huge machines to run very complex or very high-end infrastructure for a development workload that didn't really require it. So it can increase cost dramatically. You can have permissive access everywhere being granted to other users, to service accounts. So the way to kind of tackle that is to really have proper governance in place before you start, right? So have some policies. Don't completely get in the way of your developers, because that would hinder agility, but have some policies and some controls and safe and guardrails in place to have something that is secure and kind of protected against at least some of the most concerning things in terms of security and cost. And then you give wiggle room for your developers and your team to build and move fast within limits, but still they need some agility. They need some way to, some freedom to create their own stuff and innovate. So yeah, think about the not creating an environment that's too permissive and too, Wild West for people to do whatever they want. It could be great in terms of innovation, but it can cause you trouble.
As a non-tech person, the way my brain translates this is watch out for scale, really. Much like GPS, originally it was a military technology, right? When it was released into the wild, maybe there were some scaling issues, maybe access issues, but just like you said, the governance part is important, because once you give people the power to do something, you also give them the power to do the equivalent of that something to the negative. Much like with GPS, for example, all of a sudden we were able to stalk and track someone, not necessarily the ideal application of GPS. And similarly here, you can have great power, but with that comes great responsibility. Yes, I am a Spider-Man fan. Radko, this is our last question. Maybe you can jump in here with something that you think, or maybe you've heard our clients being scared of, telling you, this is my concern, I'm worried.
Okay, so my answer for this question, it's, well, the challenges depends on the industry from which the client comes. In the area which we observation that many challenges are faced by the fintech and the customers, as well as those who implemented solution based on the machine learning that we observed. And the Netguru has teams of qualified experts who take up such challenges every day. So I think this is the current market, and our clients potentially afraid about some data, and when it's storage, maybe, because this is very important for the fintech customers. So the security part of these pillars which we talked about today.
Spot on response. And gentlemen, I have to say, usually I have to be the time police. Today we are about to finish exactly on the mark that we intended. So major congrats for that subconscious time management that I'm seeing here. And just one question not a question really, just a comment that I wanted to pop up over here, because the reason that we're having the discussion is ADN, and I just wanted to make everybody know that we have Bertrand here, the lead web developer from ADN, actually watching us. So great to have you here, Bertrand. And with that, I would like to thank you, Victor, and thank you, Radek, for today's conversation. If the audience has learned at least half of what I have learned, then everybody's going to be much, much smarter after this 60 minutes. Unless you have any closing remarks, I would just like to thank you and thank the audience, and invite the audience to follow for more of such live discussions. And of course, every Tuesday we have a disruption talk. Sometimes it's cloud, sometimes it's product, sometimes it's sales. Come and find out what's going to be there on the next Tuesday. And of course, if you yourself are facing any challenges on the cloud front, just call me. I'll call Radek. Radek will call Victor, and we will solve it for you. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Till next time.